What if the person you love most is living a lie? Not a small lie like a hidden debt or a secret past, but a lie so profound, so fundamental, it rewrites the very laws of nature. Imagine the person you share your bed with, the person who holds your children, isn't actually human. They look human, they sound human, they bleed just like you do. But there are signs, aren't there? The strange, distant look in their eyes whenever they stare at the ocean. A profound, inconsolable sadness that surfaces for no reason. And a deep, primal connection to the sea that feels less like an appreciation and more like a longing for home. This isn't the plot of a science fiction movie. For centuries, along the storm-battered coastlines of Scotland, Ireland, and Scandinavia, this was a whispered reality. A story told by fishermen with salt-caked hands and haunted eyes. The story of the Selkies, beings of impossible duality. In the cold, churning depths of the North Atlantic, they are seals, sleek, graceful, and perfectly at home in the crushing blackness. But on land, they possess a power that is both a gift and a curse. They can shed their sealskin, hide it away, and walk among us as humans of breathtaking beauty. They are a bridge between two worlds, belonging fully to neither. And their magic, their very existence, is bound to a single vulnerable object: their shed skin. To possess a Selkie skin is to possess the Selkie itself. It is the key to their prison, the anchor that binds their magical soul to our mundane terrestrial world. And for a lonely human, stumbling upon that skin is a temptation few can resist. But this story isn't just about a magical creature. It's about an ancient pact, a cosmic bargain that always ends in heartbreak. And it raises a terrifying question that echoes through every version of the legend. What is the true price of stealing a soul? And what unspeakable power is unleashed when that soul finally comes to reclaim what was stolen? The legend of the Selkie, or the seal folk, emerges from the fog and sea spray of the northern isles of Scotland, Orkney and Shetland, as well as the coasts of Ireland, Iceland, and the Faroe Islands. These are places where the sea is not a gentle neighbor. It is a powerful, unforgiving god. It gives life in the form of fish and trade, but it also takes it without warning, swallowing ships and fishermen whole. In these communities, the line between the natural and the supernatural was thin, porous. The ocean was a realm of mystery, and the creatures within it were more than just animals. Seals, in particular, held a special, almost sacred significance. Their large, dark, mournful eyes seemed to hold a human-like intelligence and sorrow. They were the people of the sea. Sailors would report seeing them weep for their dead, an observation that blurred the line between beast and person. It was from this deep, primal respect and fear that the legend of the Selkie was born. They weren't monsters like the Kraken or malevolent spirits. They were something far more complex, a reflection of humanity's own relationship with the wild. They represented a life of freedom, a world without the hardships of farming rocky soil or mending nets with frozen fingers. They were a dream of a different existence, just beneath the waves. The classic Selkie tale almost always begins the same way. A man, often a lonely fisherman or a farmer living by the coast, is walking along a deserted beach. There he stumbles upon a group of otherworldly beautiful women, dancing naked in the moonlight. Piled nearby are their sealskins. Overcome with desire and loneliness, he seizes one of the skins and hides it. When the women are ready to return to the sea, they all reclaim their skins and transform back into seals, slipping into the waves, all except one. The one whose skin was stolen is now trapped, powerless. She cannot return to her home, her family, her world. She is stranded. The man approaches her, offering her clothes, comfort, and a new life. Left with no choice, the Selkie wife follows him. She becomes a perfect partner. She is a dutiful wife, a loving mother, and brings a strange luck to the household. The fisherman's nets are always full. His crops never fail. His life is transformed from one of solitude and hardship into one of prosperity and love. He loves her deeply, but his love is built on a foundation of theft and coercion. He keeps her skin locked away in a sea chest, the key always on his person, a constant, unspoken reminder of his power over her. But the Selkie is never truly happy. She is in exile. Her human life is a gilded cage. Her children, born of this union, are her only solace, but even they cannot fill the void left by the ocean. She will often be found staring out at the waves for hours, a silent tear tracing a path down her cheek. The salt in the air is a constant, painful reminder of the freedom she has lost. She is a creature of the sea, and the land is slowly suffocating her soul. Her children often bear subtle marks of their heritage, perhaps small webbing between their fingers and toes, which their mother carefully hides, or an uncanny ability to swim. They are the living embodiment of her two worlds, caught between the land and the sea just as she is. The years pass, 7, 9, sometimes more. The fisherman grows comfortable, complacent. He believes his secret is safe, that his stolen bride has finally accepted her fate. But the call of the sea, the longing, never fades for a Selkie. It is in their blood, a song that only they can hear. And then, one day, the inevitable happens. The children, perhaps playing a game of hide and seek, discover the old locked sea chest. Curious, they find the key their father carelessly left behind, or they tell their mother about the chest they found in the attic. In that moment, everything changes. The Selkie wife opens the chest, and there it is. Her skin, her soul, her freedom. The story describes the moment she touches it as a powerful, instantaneous reawakening. The years of human domesticity fall away like a cloak. The sadness in her eyes is replaced by a fierce, wild light. She is no longer just a fisherman's wife. She is a creature of immense power, a daughter of the ocean reclaiming her birthright. And here, she faces an impossible choice, a decision that defines the tragic heart of the legend. On one side, her human children, whom she loves with every fiber of her being. On the other, the boundless freedom of the sea, the world she was born to, the only place she can ever be whole. She must choose between her children and her own soul. Almost every version of the tale ends the same way. With tears streaming down her face, she kisses her children goodbye, promising to watch over them from the waves. She runs to the shore, the sealskin clutched in her hands. And as she pulls it over her shoulders, the transformation is immediate. The human woman vanishes, and in her place is a sleek, beautiful seal, who dives into the surf without a moment's hesitation, never to be seen on land again. The fisherman returns home to an empty house, a heartbroken family, and the crushing realization that a love built on a cage can never, ever last. He has lost everything. But while this is the most common telling, it is not the only one. There are other, darker versions of the tale. Stories of what happens when the Selkie doesn't just leave, but seeks revenge. Stories of the rare and far more dangerous Selkie male, and the human women who fall under their spell. And the most mysterious question of all: what happens to the half-human children left behind, forever caught between two worlds? To understand the male Selkie, you have to forget everything you think you know. Forget the gentle, victimized maiden whose skin is stolen. Forget the tragic figure longing for a home she can't return to. The male of the species is an entirely different creature. He is not a victim. He is a force of nature. He is a hunter, a suitor, and sometimes a king. He doesn't wait for a human to find his seal skin on the shore. He chooses. He chooses when to walk on land, and he chooses whom he will love. And that choice is often a curse for the woman who catches his eye. The most famous of these tales, immortalized in a haunting ballad, is the story of the great Selkie of Selkie, a remote barren rock in the Orkney Islands. Imagine a young woman, living in a small coastal village. She has a child, a beautiful baby boy, but no husband. Her neighbors whisper. She is isolated, alone with her secret. One day, a stranger appears at her door. He's tall, dark, and impossibly handsome, with eyes that hold the depth and the coldness of the North Sea. He looks at the child in her arms, and he speaks. He tells her that he is the boy's father, and then he tells her who and what he truly is. He is a Selkie, a man on the land, but a great gray seal in the sea. He calls himself the ruler of the deep, a king in his own watery kingdom. He makes her a proposition, though it's less a proposition and more a decree. He tells her she will be a good nurse to his son, and for her service, he will pay her. He gives her a purse heavy with gold, but there's a condition. He will return in 7 years, and on that day, he will take his son back with him to the sea. The boy, he explains, must learn to swim the foam. He belongs to his father's world. The woman is heartbroken, but what choice does she have? This being is not a man she can argue with. He is something ancient and powerful. So she agrees. She raises the boy, and for 7 years she knows her time with him is fleeting. She watches him grow, seeing the wildness in his eyes, his unnatural love for the crashing waves. And then, just as he promised, the Selkie father returns. He stands on the shore, a commanding figure against the gray sky, and he calls for his son. The boy goes to him without hesitation, and together, they walk into the surf, transforming into two seals before disappearing beneath the waves. But the prophecy wasn't finished. Before he left for the final time, the Selkie told his human lover one last thing. He told her she would go on to marry a good man, a gunner good, a seal hunter, and that one day her new husband would go out hunting and make a doubly kill. He would shoot two seals, one large and gray, the other a young pup. He would bring their skins home to his wife. The story ends with the woman, years later, receiving those very two pelts from her husband, recognizing them instantly, the skin of her former lover, and the skin of the son she was forced to give away. This isn't a story of romance. It's a tragedy, a prophecy of inevitable loss. The male Selkie brings not a fairy tale love, but a temporary, passionate, and ultimately devastating connection to a world that humans can never truly be a part of. This archetype echoes through countless other stories. The male Selkie is almost always described as breathtakingly beautiful. He has dark hair, dark, soulful eyes, and a quiet, brooding charisma that mortal women find irresistible. He doesn't need to have his skin stolen to be bound to the land. His own desires, his curiosity, or a self-imposed quest bring him ashore. Often, the tales say he can only remain on land for a set period, typically 7 nights, or sometimes for 7 years at a time before he must spend the next 7 in the sea. This built-in expiration date is part of his tragic allure. He is the ultimate mysterious stranger, the one who offers a glimpse of a magical world, but can never, ever stay. Why would these coastal communities create such a figure? Perhaps it was a way to explain the unexplainable. In villages where men were fishermen and sailors, gone for months or years at a time, sometimes never returning, a story of a handsome stranger from the sea could be a way to legitimize a child born out of wedlock. It was a romantic, if sorrowful explanation that placed the blame not on a human failing, but on the irresistible magic of an otherworldly being. It transformed a social scandal into a local legend. These stories also served as cautionary tales for young women. They warned against the allure of outsiders, the dangers of falling for someone who wasn't part of the community, someone whose past was unknown and whose future was uncertain. The Selkie man embodies this danger. He is exciting, he is different, he is passionate, but he will break your heart. He will leave, and in the most heartbreaking tales, he will take your children with him. Unlike the female Selkie, who is often a passive character trapped by circumstance, the male Selkie is a figure of immense power and agency. He is in control. When he loves a human woman, it is on his terms. He is a king visiting from another realm, not a refugee seeking shelter. This power dynamic is what makes him so much more formidable. He doesn't need your pity. He commands your respect, your fear, and your love. And he knows it. Some folklorists believe he is a remnant of an older, pre-Christian sea god, a pagan deity of the tides and the creatures within, whose legend was softened over the centuries into that of a supernatural suitor. But his power isn't just seductive, it can also be terrifying. The male Selkie is fiercely protective of his kin and his domain. While the stories of him as a lover are tragic, the stories of him as an enemy are drenched in blood. He is, after all, part animal. He possesses a wildness, a primal connection to the unforgiving sea that no human can ever truly fathom. He is gentle and loving to those he chooses, but cross him, harm his family, or betray his trust, and you will awaken a wrath that has the force of a winter storm. The gunner who shoots a seal might not just be killing an animal. He could be murdering a Selkie's brother, sister, or child. And Selkies do not forgive. They do not forget. They have long memories, and their world is just beneath the surface of our own. A fisherman who harms one might find his nets are always empty. A sailor might find his boat dashed against the rocks by a sudden, unnatural storm. The Selkie's revenge is not swift and fiery. It is cold, patient, and as relentless as the tide. It is the creeping dread of knowing the ocean itself is against you. And it's this side of the legend, the dark side, that truly reveals their power. We've seen the tragedy they can cause through love. But what happens when that love turns to hate? What happens when a human doesn't just break a Selkie's heart, but actively tries to enslave or destroy them? The gentle lover vanishes, and in his place rises something else entirely. A monster from the deep, intent on dragging you down into the cold, dark water from which it came. This isn't a fairy tale revenge. It's a force of nature reasserting its dominance. Imagine a man who has wronged a Selkie. He doesn't face a scorned lover. He faces the embodiment of the unforgiving sea itself. The storm that sinks his boat isn't just bad weather. It's a targeted squall, a personal vendetta from the deep. The rogue wave that sweeps him from the deck has intelligence behind it, a cold, calculating fury. His children, born of that union, will forever hear a song in the waves that he can't, a mournful call that he is now forbidden to answer. The ocean, once a source of his livelihood, becomes his prison wall, a constant shimmering reminder of the love he stole and the power he so foolishly underestimated. The Selkie doesn't need to lift a finger against him on land. She simply reclaims her world, and in doing so erases him from it. This dark potential, this capacity for both profound love and devastating retribution, is at the heart of the most famous Selkie story of all. It's a tale told in countless variations across the windswept coasts of Scotland, Ireland, and the Faroe Islands. It's the story of the stolen skin. It almost always begins the same way. A lonely man, a fisherman, a farmer, a crofter, is walking the shore at twilight or under the bone-white light of a full moon. He's a man whose life is defined by hardship and solitude, his hands calloused from nets and his heart aching with a quiet emptiness. And then he sees them. A gathering of seals haul themselves onto the sand, and in a ripple of otherworldly magic, they shrug off their sleek, dark skins. Standing in their place are the most beautiful people he has ever seen. Their skin pale like the inside of a seashell, their laughter carrying on the salty air. They dance on the shore, their movements fluid and free, utterly unaware they are being watched. And the man's eyes fixate on one of them, a woman of such breathtaking beauty that his loneliness becomes a sharp, physical pain. He watches, hidden behind the rocks, as she dances with an unearthly grace, her long hair whipping in the sea breeze. He doesn't see a wild creature of the sea. He sees an answer to his prayers, a cure for his isolation. And then he sees her sealskin, lying discarded on a rock, glistening like wet velvet in the moonlight. In that moment, a thought takes root in his mind, a dark, selfish, and desperate thought. He knows the legends. He knows that without her skin, she cannot return to the sea. She will be bound to the land, bound to him. He convinces himself it's for the best. He can give her a good life, a warm home. He can love her more than the cold sea ever could. With his heart pounding in his chest, a frantic mix of fear and desire, he creeps from his hiding place, snatches the sealskin, and runs. He hides it away, burying it deep in a sea chest, under a flagstone in the hearth, or in the rafters of his barn, someplace he believes it will never be found. When the other Selkies retrieve their skins and dive back into the waves, she is left behind. He watches her frantic search, hears her cries of pure, unadulterated panic and despair as the tide turns and her family vanishes beneath the surf. She is alone, naked, and terrified on a foreign shore. And then he emerges. He offers her his coat, his home, his protection. He offers her kindness. What choice does she have? She is powerless, stripped of her very identity, a refugee in a world that is not her own. She goes with him. And so their life together begins. He is, by all accounts, a good husband. He is gentle with her, cares for her, and in his own way, he adores her. They have children, beautiful children with their mother's deep, soulful eyes that always seem to be looking at something far away. The Selkie wife is a perfect wife. She keeps the house, raises the children, and is a quiet, dutiful partner. But a profound, unshakable melancholy hangs over her like a sea mist. She never truly laughs. Her smiles never quite reach her eyes. She spends hours, days staring out at the ocean, her hands idle in her lap, a silent longing etched onto her face. Her husband sees it. He knows its source, and it's a constant, gnawing reminder of his theft. He might even feel guilt, but his fear of losing her is greater. So he keeps his secret locked away, just as he keeps her skin locked away. He thinks he's given her everything, a family, a home, security, but he's given her a cage. A comfortable, gilded cage, but a cage nonetheless. He has stolen her very essence, her freedom, her soul's home. She can love her children, she may even grow to feel a sort of affection for the man who trapped her, but she is living only half a life. Every crash of the waves on the shore is a call she cannot answer. Every scent of salt on the wind is a memory of a world she can no longer touch. She is an exile in her own life, and the weight of it is slowly, inexorably crushing her spirit. Years pass. 5, 10, maybe 20. The children grow. One day, while the husband is out fishing, the children are playing, perhaps hide and seek in the old barn, or rummaging through a dusty chest in the attic looking for old blankets. And they find it. A bundle of something soft and strange hidden away. It's a shimmering pelt, smelling faintly of the sea and of a life they've never known. They don't know what it is, but they know it's important. They run to their mother, holding it out to her, this curious treasure they've unearthed. The moment she sees it, everything changes. The years of quiet sadness, of patient waiting fall away. A light returns to her eyes that no one on land has ever seen. The blood rushes back into her face. She is no longer the fisherman's wife. She is herself again. She snatches the skin from their hands, her hands trembling. She holds it to her chest. A missing part of her soul finally returned. She looks at her children, and here the legends diverge in their cruelty. In some versions, her love for them is a powerful anchor. She kisses them goodbye, a tear rolling down her cheek, and tells them she must go, but that she will always watch over them from the waves. In other, more heartbreaking versions, the call of the sea is so absolute, so overwhelming that her human life, her human children, simply fade from her mind. The primal need to return home eclipses everything else. She doesn't even say goodbye. She runs from the cottage, a wild thing uncaged, leaving her children standing in the doorway, confused and heartbroken. She reaches the shore and doesn't hesitate. She pulls the skin over her shoulders, and the transformation is instantaneous. The weary, land-bound woman vanishes, and in her place is a sleek, powerful seal. She dives into the churning surf with a cry of pure ecstasy, a sound of homecoming that echoes across the water. When the fisherman returns, his nets full, he finds the house cold. His children are crying, telling him a strange story about a beautiful coat they found, and how their mother put it on and ran to the sea. He rushes to the hiding place, his heart a block of ice in his chest, and finds it empty. He runs to the shore and screams her name, but the only answer is the mocking cry of the gulls and the endless sigh of the waves. He might see a seal far out, its dark head bobbing in the water, looking back at the shore one last time before it disappears forever. Or he might see nothing at all. He has lost everything, all for a love he tried to own instead of earn. The story serves as a profound warning. You cannot cage the wild. You cannot force love through theft and imprisonment. But it leaves us with so many questions. What becomes of the husband, left alone with the consequences of his selfish act? And more importantly, what of the children, born of both land and sea, belonging to neither world completely? Are they forever torn between two identities, or do they possess a power, a magic all their own? These children, the offspring of a human man and a Selkie woman, are a living paradox. They walk the land, but the salt of the sea runs through their veins. In many of the old tales, this duality manifests in a physical way. They are born with telltale signs of their marine heritage, a fine, downy fur on their backs that soon vanishes, or more commonly, a delicate webbing between their fingers and toes. This is the mark of the sea, a physical reminder of the world their mother lost. Imagine the Selkie mother trapped on land, looking at her newborn child. She sees the same webbed hand she once had in her human form, a feature that would have been celebrated in her own world, a sign of being a strong swimmer, of belonging. But here, in the world of men, it is a mark of the other. It is a secret that must be kept, a difference that could lead to suspicion, fear, and ostracism. And so, in an act of heartbreaking love and sacrifice, she performs a painful ritual. With a sharp shell or a small knife, she carefully, tearfully, snips the thin membranes connecting her child's digits. It is a severing not just of skin but of a connection to the sea. She is trying to make them whole in the human world by cutting away a piece of their true selves, hoping to spare them the pain of being different, of being caught between the tides. But you cannot cut away the ocean from a soul that was born of it. Even without the physical signs, the Selkie children are different. They are often described as having a far-off look in their eyes, as if they are gazing at a horizon no one else can see. They are quiet, melancholic children, drawn to the shore with a magnetic pull they cannot explain. While other children build sandcastles, they stand at the water's edge, listening. They hear whispers in the crashing waves, a song in the cry of the gulls that speaks a language their heart understands, even if their mind does not. They feel no fear of the cold, churning water. To them it is not a threat but a lullaby. It is a homecoming they have never known. Their father watches them, a knot of fear and guilt tightening in his chest. He sees their mother in their eyes, in their longing for the sea. He tries to keep them away from the coast, tells them stories of dangerous currents and sea monsters, anything to break the ocean's spell. But he is fighting against their very nature. He stole one being from the sea, and in doing so, he created two more who are forever tethered to it. Years pass. The Selkie wife remains a dutiful, if sorrowful, partner. The children grow, their connection to the sea is silent, humming current beneath the surface of their lives. The sealskin, the key to everything, remains hidden. The husband has locked it away in the deepest, darkest corner of his home, in an old sea chest in the attic beneath piles of forgotten nets and winter blankets. He believes it is safe. He believes his secret is secure. But secrets, like the tide, have a way of coming out. One day, one of the children, perhaps the daughter, who has her mother's deep, soulful eyes, is playing. Driven by a child's curiosity, or maybe by something deeper, an instinct she doesn't understand, she finds herself in the dusty attic. She explores the forgotten relics of her father's life, but her hands are drawn to the heavy, salt-stained wooden chest. The lock is old and rusted. With a bit of effort, it gives way. Inside, beneath the musty smell of old linen and tar, is a strange bundle. It is heavy and it feels alive. It seems to hum with a low, resonant energy. She pulls it out. It is a pelt, a sealskin softer and more lustrous than anything she has ever touched. It smells not of dust and time, but of salt, of storm, of the deep, cold ocean. She doesn't know what it is, but she knows with an unshakable certainty that it is important. She feels a connection to it, a sense of recognition, as if she is holding a piece of her own missing soul. She takes the skin downstairs to her mother, who is sitting by the hearth mending a fishing net, her movements slow and listless. The girl holds out the pelt. "Mother," she says, "I found this." The moment the Selkie woman sees the skin, the world stops. The years of sorrow, of quiet desperation, of exile, they all fall away in an instant. The dullness in her eyes is replaced by a fierce, brilliant light. The color returns to her cheeks. She drops the net and reaches for the skin with trembling hands. She doesn't snatch it, she receives it. She holds it to her face, inhaling the scent of her lost home, her lost self. Tears stream down her face, but these are not the silent, sorrowful tears her family is used to. These are tears of overwhelming joy, of recognition, of liberation. Her entire being changes. The stooped, sad woman is gone, and in her place stands a queen who has just been handed back her crown. She turns to her children, and now she must make the most impossible choice a mother can face. In her hands she holds her freedom, her very essence. Before her stand the children she loves, the beings who have been her only anchor, her only joy in this long, dry exile. But the call of the sea, once reawakened, is not a whisper. It is a roar. It is an undeniable primal force that drowns out everything else. She knows she cannot stay. To remain now would not just be captivity, it would be a living death. She gathers her children close, her voice, for the first time, filled not with melancholy, but with the power and music of the ocean. She finally tells them the truth. She tells them of the world beneath the waves, of the seal folk who dance in the currents. She tells them that she is one of them, and because of her they are too. She explains that she must go home, that her body and soul ache for the water. She kisses their foreheads, promising them that she will never truly be gone. "Whenever you miss me," she says, "go to the shore. I will be the seventh wave that breaks on the sand. I will be the sleek, dark head that bobs in the surf, watching over you." Her love for them is immense, a force of nature in itself, but it cannot overcome the call of her own nature. And then, with one last, lingering look at the children who are her heart, she walks out of the little cottage for the last time. She walks to the rocky shore, the sealskin clutched in her hands. Her family watches from the doorway, frozen, unable to comprehend what is happening. As she reaches the water's edge, she pulls the skin over her shoulders. The transformation is instantaneous and seamless. The human woman melts away, and in her place is a large, beautiful seal, sleek and powerful. She gives a single joyous bark, a sound of pure, unadulterated freedom, and dives into the churning waves. She disappears beneath the surface, leaving behind a broken-hearted husband and two children standing on the shore, who now understand they are royalty of a kingdom, they can never enter. They are left with a legacy of magic and a lifetime of loss, forever watching the waves, searching for their mother's face in the endless gray expanse of the sea. What becomes of a family so profoundly broken? And what of the Selkie mother, now returned to her home? Is her joy complete? Or is it forever tinged with the memory of the children she had to leave behind? The questions hang in the salt-laced air, as heavy and persistent as the coastal fog. For the Selkie, the return to the sea is not a simple homecoming. It is a violent, ecstatic rebirth. The first plunge into the cold, embracing water is a shock that reawakens every nerve. The clumsy, heavy limbs of a human woman melt away, replaced by the streamlined power of a creature born to the currents. The world transforms from a flat, hard surface underfoot to a three-dimensional universe of motion and sound. She can feel the pressure changes in the deep, hear the clicks of dolphins miles away, and taste the subtle shifts in salinity that tell her where the rich feeding grounds lie. This is freedom. A freedom so absolute, so primal, that it almost erases the memory of the land. She rejoins her clan, a pod of familiar faces and sleek bodies that move with a grace she had nearly forgotten. There is joy in the reunion, in the silent underwater dances and the shared hunts through forests of kelp. She is home. She is whole. She is herself again. But the human heart she carried for so many years does not simply vanish with the sealskin she reclaimed. It beats on, a phantom limb aching with a loss the sea cannot soothe. At night, while her kin sleep, bobbing gently in the sheltered coves, she finds herself staring at the moon, the same moon that shines down on the little cottage with the thatched roof. She remembers the warmth of a hearth fire, a stark contrast to the deep, abiding cold of the ocean. She remembers the weight of a child in her arms, the soft sound of their breathing as they slept. These memories are ghosts that haunt her in the deep. When she sees a mother seal nosing its pup, a pang of grief, sharp and debilitating, courses through her. Her children, her land-born children. She had sung them the ocean's lullabies, and now the ocean itself sounds like they're weeping. Her joy is a fractured thing, a beautiful mosaic with missing pieces. She is caught between two worlds, belonging fully to neither. In the sea, she is a mother without her young. On the land, she was a wife without her freedom. The tragedy of the Selkie is not just in being captured, but in the inescapable truth that once she has lived in both worlds, she can never be entirely content in one. Back on the shore, the fisherman's cottage is no longer a home. It is a tomb, filled with the silence she left behind. The fire in the hearth seems to give no warmth. The meals he cooks taste of ash. Every corner of the small house holds a memory of her. The worn stool where she sat to brush her long dark hair. The faint scent of salt and sea lavender that still clings to the blankets. Her husband, the man who loved her enough to steal her freedom, is now a prisoner of his own making. His grief is a terrible, consuming thing, because it is intertwined with a profound and unshakable guilt. He looks at his hands, the same hands that held her, that caressed her face, and that hid her sealskin in the locked chest, and he sees the hands of a thief, a jailer. He had believed his love was a shelter, a safe harbor for her. He now understands it was a cage, however gilded. He had stolen not just a skin but a soul. And the children are the living embodiment of this broken union. They are a paradox. They have their father's sturdy legs, made for walking the rocky shores, but they have their mother's eyes, deep and gray and full of a longing they cannot name. They don't fear the ocean the way other village children do. They are drawn to it. They will stand for hours at the water's edge, letting the cold foam rush over their bare feet. Their faces turn to the waves as if listening for a voice no one else can hear. The boy, the older of the two, has an uncanny sense of the tides. He can tell when a storm is coming long before the sky darkens, a restlessness taking hold of him, an agitation in his blood. The girl, younger and quieter, collects sea-smooth glass and shells, arranging them in spiral patterns that echo the shape of a nautilus. She hums strange, melodic tunes without words, melodies that seem ancient and sorrowful. They are her mother's songs, bubbling up from a place deeper than memory. Their father watches them, and his heart breaks anew each day. He sees her in their every gesture. He tries to be both father and mother, to fill the immense void she has left, but he is only a man. How can he explain their mother's departure? How can he tell them he is the reason she is gone? He mumbles stories of her being called away, of her being too good for the land, but the children feel the lie in his words. They feel the truth in the constant, mournful call of the sea. As the years begin to slip by, the fisherman's grief curdles into a desperate, fragile hope. He starts to neglect his fishing, his duties. He spends his days on the headland, a spyglass pressed to his eye, scanning the colony of seals that sun themselves on the distant rocks. The other villagers whisper that he's gone mad with grief, that he's chasing a ghost. But he isn't looking for a ghost. He's looking for a specific seal. He's searching for a pair of eyes that he would know anywhere, even in a different form. He calls her name into the wind, a desperate prayer swallowed by the roar of the surf. He believes he has to believe that the love they shared was real, that it might be strong enough to call her back one more time. Meanwhile, beneath the waves, the Selkie mother is drawn by that same impossible bond. She cannot stay away. The pull of her children is a current stronger than any ocean tide. She begins to swim closer to the shore than is safe, risking being seen by hunters or other fishermen. She circles the bay where her cottage sits, a sleek dark shadow moving through the green water. She is a ghost from a different world, haunting the edges of her former life. One bright, windswept afternoon, she dares to go closer than ever before. Peering through the shimmering surface, she sees them, her children playing on the beach. They are taller, their hair lightened by the sun. Her boy is skipping stones across the water with a skill that makes her ache with pride. Her little girl is building a castle of sand and driftwood, her head bent in concentration. The sight is a spear through the heart. The love for them is so overwhelming, so physically painful, that she almost forgets she cannot breathe the air. She surfaces, just her head and her large dark eyes visible above the waves. She watches them, drinking in the sight of them, memorizing the new lines of their faces. The little girl, as if sensing a gaze upon her, looks up from her castle. Her eyes scan the water, past the gulls, past the breaking waves, and lock onto the seal. For a long moment they just stare at each other. There is no fear in the child's face, only a strange, deep, and profound sense of recognition, a feeling of comfort that she cannot explain. A slow smile spreads across her face, and she raises a small, sandy hand in a wave. The Selkie's heart shatters. A wave of love and sorrow so immense it threatens to drown her. With a soft bark of anguish, she dives deep, disappearing into the cold, forgiving depths, leaving behind nothing but a ripple on the surface and a little girl on the shore, who is certain, absolutely certain, that a seal just waved goodbye. That little girl would grow into an old woman, and to her dying day, she would tell the story. She would tell of the impossible sadness in her mother's eyes, and of the final graceful wave of a flipper that was more human than any hand. She was the first witness to the heartbreak, the living proof that the sea had called its own back home. Her father found her there, a tiny solitary figure against the vast, indifferent gray of the ocean. He saw the look on her face and he didn't need to ask. He simply knew. A cold dread, colder than the North Atlantic, seized his heart. He ran. He didn't run towards the water. He knew with a gut-wrenching certainty that it was useless. The sea does not give back what it claims. He ran back to the cottage, his feet pounding on the damp earth, his breath tearing at his lungs. He burst through the door and went straight for the old sea chest at the foot of their bed. He threw it open, and his world ended. It was empty. The beautiful shimmering sealskin, the key to his wife's true nature, the secret he had guarded with a possessive, desperate love for so many years, was gone. He fell to his knees, the rough wood of the floorboards pressing into his skin, and a sound escaped him that was not quite a sob and not quite a scream. It was the sound of a man who has just realized he was never a husband, but a jailer. He had built a life, a family, a home, all on a foundation of theft. He had mistaken possession for affection and control for love. He had told himself he was protecting her, keeping her safe in a world that wouldn't understand. But who was he protecting her from? He was the danger. He was the cage. A cage made of devotion, perhaps, but a cage nonetheless. And the bird had finally flown. In the days that followed, a profound and heavy silence fell over the cottage. It was a silence that screamed louder than any storm. The man was a ghost in his own home, moving through the rooms, his eyes tracing the spaces where she used to be. He'd pick up her knitting, the needle still holding a half-finished scarf for their daughter, and the scent of sea salt and heather that always clung to her would rise up and break his heart all over again. He stopped mending his nets. He stopped going to the village. His life became a vigil, his window a frame for the endless, mocking expanse of the sea. And the girl was different. While her father was consumed by a grief that was tangled with guilt, her sorrow was purer, stranger. How do you mourn a mother who isn't dead? How do you explain to the other children that your mother didn't leave, she just changed? She didn't have a grave to visit, she had an entire ocean. Every wave that crashed on the shore was a potential message. Every seal that bobbed its head in the surf was a possible relative. The beach became her church, the tides her hymn book. She would sit for hours on the same rock where she'd last seen her mother, talking to the waves, telling them about her day, about her father's sadness, about the hole in their lives that was shaped exactly like a woman who smelled of the sea. The villagers, of course, had their own versions of the story. They had always found the fisherman's wife a little strange. Her ethereal beauty, her eyes that held the depth of the ocean, her habit of staring out at the water for hours on end. They'd whispered that she was Fae, one of the fair folk. But now, with her sudden, impossible disappearance, the whispers solidified into legend. The story of the fisherman who stole a Selkie skin became a cautionary tale, told around peat fires on long winter nights. A story about the wildness of the sea and the foolishness of men who think they can tame it. The family's private tragedy became public folklore. For 7 years, the man kept his vigil. He aged decades in that time, his hair turning the color of sea foam, his face carved with the deep lines of regret. He would walk the shoreline at dawn and at dusk, his eyes scanning the waves, searching for a sign, for a glimpse of the seal with the hauntingly human eyes he knew was his wife. He'd call her name into the wind, the sound swallowed by the roar of the surf. He was hoping for a miracle, for forgiveness, for a second chance he knew he didn't deserve. The daughter grew too. She inherited her mother's eyes and her father's stubbornness. But she also had something that was uniquely her own. A quiet understanding. She didn't share her father's desperate, guilty hope for her mother's return to land. She knew with an instinct that ran deeper than blood, that her mother was where she was supposed to be. She was free. And so the girl's vigil was different. She wasn't looking for a woman to walk out of the waves. She was looking for a seal to swim closer to the shore. One evening, as the sun bled across the horizon, painting the clouds in hues of orange and violet, the girl was on her rock as always. Her father was further down the beach, a lonely silhouette against the dying light. A colony of seals was basking on a distant skerry, their dark, sleek bodies like wet stones. But one seal was separate from the others. It swam much closer to the shore than was usual, its large, dark eyes fixed on the girl. It didn't move like the other seals. There was a grace to its movements, a purpose. The girl's heart began to beat faster. She didn't move, didn't breathe. The seal swam closer still, until it was just beyond the pull of the waves, its head held high above the water. And in its eyes the girl saw it. Not just the wildness of an animal, but a profound, bottomless well of love and of sorrow. A mother's sorrow, for the child she could watch but never hold, for the life she had to leave behind. The seal let out a soft, mournful cry. It wasn't the bark of an animal. It was a sound that carried across the water and struck the girl's heart like a bell. It was the sound of a name, her name. And in that moment, the girl understood that the barrier between their worlds was both absolute and meaningless. Her mother was gone, but she had never truly left. Down the beach, the old fisherman saw it too. He saw the lone seal, saw his daughter's rapt attention. He took a step forward, his hands clenched into fists, a wild, impossible hope flaring in his chest. Could she have come back? Could she forgive him? But as he watched, the seal gave one last, long look at the girl on the rock, then dipped its head beneath the surface and was gone, leaving nothing but the ever-present, whispering waves. It was not a reunion. It was a reminder of what he had taken, and what the sea, in its infinite justice, had taken back. And for the first time, he wasn't just mourning his wife. He was mourning the creature he had stolen from her home. This profound shift in his grief was a sea change within his own soul. He began to see his wife not as a person he had lost, but as a being he had caged. Every shell on the beach, every piece of sea glass, was no longer a memento of their love, but a piece of the home he had barred her from. He would take his children to the shore, and instead of telling them stories of her beauty and her kindness on land, he began to tell them the truth, as best he could understand it. He told them of their mother's true nature, of her shimmering skin, of her other life beneath the waves. He spoke of the sea not as the thing that stole her, but as the thing she belonged to, and in his children he began to see it. A change. It was subtle at first. A faraway look in their eyes when they stared at the horizon. An uncanny ability to hold their breath for just a little too long when they played in the shallows. His daughter's hair, which had always been dark and thick, now seemed to catch the light with an iridescent seal-like sheen. His son, quiet and observant, could sit for hours perfectly still on the rocks, just watching the waves, as if listening to a conversation no one else could hear. They were no longer just the children of a fisherman. They were the children of the sea. This is one of the most haunting and fascinating aspects of the Selkie legend. The legacy they leave behind. The children born of these unions are caught between two worlds, belonging fully to neither. They are a living bridge between the mundane and the magical, and their very existence is a testament to a love that crossed the ultimate boundary. In the folklore of Orkney and Shetland, these children are often marked, physically and spiritually. The most common tale is of them being born with a small webbing between their fingers and toes, a physical remnant of their seal-like ancestry. Sometimes it was said that a horny, rough patch of skin would appear on their hands or feet, like a tiny piece of a seal's flipper, a patch that could never be softened. These weren't seen as deformities but as signs, proof of their otherworldly heritage, a whisper of the magic flowing through their veins. But the marks were more than skin deep. These children were said to possess an overwhelming, often painful love for the ocean. It was more than just the appreciation a coastal dweller might have. It was a deep instinctual pull, a yearning for a home they had never known. They were often described as melancholic, prone to long silences and fits of intense longing, especially during high tides or storms. While other children played games on the land, the Selkie would be found at the water's edge, as if waiting for a summons. They were said to have gifts too, an innate understanding of the tides and the weather, a natural talent for swimming that bordered on the supernatural, and sometimes, even the ability to communicate with sea creatures. A fisherman with Selkie blood was said to be the luckiest man on the water, for the fish would practically leap into his nets, and the seals would guide him away from hidden rocks and sudden squalls. But this gift was a double-edged sword. It made them successful on the water, but it also deepened the chasm between them and their land-bound neighbors. They were outsiders marked by their magic, forever looking homeward to a place they could never truly go. This legacy didn't always end with the first generation. The stories tell of the Selkie blood running thin over time, but never disappearing completely. It could lie dormant for 100 years, only to re-emerge in a great-grandchild who is suddenly born with gray, seal-like eyes, or who feels an inexplicable sadness every time they leave the coast. It becomes a kind of beautiful, tragic family heirloom, a genetic memory of a love affair with the sea. But the tales of Selkies are not a one-way street. While the most famous stories involve a human man capturing a female Selkie, the mythology is rich with tales of the reverse. Stories of the Selkie men, the Finn men, the seal folk who come ashore to seek human lovers. And these stories, they carry a different kind of danger. If the female Selkie represents a wild, natural beauty that is captured and domesticated, the male Selkie is the embodiment of untamable, raw, and often perilous charm. The legends describe them as impossibly handsome when in human form, dark, brooding, with eyes the color of the deep sea that seem to hold ancient secrets. They are said to have a charisma that is almost hypnotic, a way of speaking that can charm any woman they set their sights on. They appear as strangers, often washed ashore after a supposed shipwreck, or simply walking out of the mist on a lonely beach. They are mysterious, with no past and no family to speak of. They fall in love quickly, passionately, and completely. A village girl, tired of the rough, predictable fishermen and farmers, suddenly finds herself the object of affection for this beautiful, poetic stranger. It's a fairy tale romance. For a time, in some versions of the myth, the male Selkie is a wonderful, if slightly strange, husband. He is a peerless lover and a doting father. But just like his female counterpart, he is bound by his nature. He cannot stay on land forever. The call of the sea, the pining, will eventually begin to consume him. He will grow distant, spending more and more time staring out at the waves. And one day, his human wife will wake up to find him gone, vanished as mysteriously as he arrived, leaving her with a broken heart and children who carry the sea in their eyes. He doesn't need his sealskin to be stolen. His very being is the key to his own prison on land, and his will is the force that eventually breaks him out. But there are darker tellings. In these tales, the male Selkie is not a romantic figure, but a predator. He is a supernatural force who comes ashore with the explicit purpose of seducing human women and luring them back to his world. He preys on loneliness and desire, promising a life of passion and wonder. The woman, so enchanted by his otherworldly charm, willingly follows him to the water's edge. He tells her to wait as he retrieves his sealskin, and when he returns in his true form, he pulls her into the waves. She is never seen again. In these stories, the sea is not a home to be returned to, but a watery grave. The Selkie man is not a tragic lover, but a siren, a beautiful monster who sings a song of love that leads only to death. This duality is what makes the legend so powerful. It explores the complexities of love and longing from both sides. Is the human who hides the sealskin a monster for trapping a magical creature, or just a lonely person desperate for love? Is the Selkie man who leaves his family a heartless creature, or is he a victim of a nature he cannot control? The stories don't offer easy answers. They simply present the tragedy of a love between two beings who are fundamentally incompatible. The fisherman who finally understood his crime was left to raise the living consequences of it. His children were a constant, beautiful, painful reminder of the line he had crossed. He had tried to force a creature of the sea to live on the land, and in doing so, he had created beings who were at home in neither. They were the children of the tide, forever caught in the ebb and flow between two worlds. They carried their father's love for the shore and their mother's longing for the deep. And as they grew, he watched them with a heart full of both pride and fear, wondering which call they would ultimately answer: the steady, solid pull of the earth beneath their feet, or the relentless, irresistible whisper of the waves. The years that followed were a tapestry woven with sea spray and hearth smoke. His eldest, a daughter named Rona, had her mother's eyes, not just the color, a deep, stormy gray, but the way she looked at the horizon, as if searching for a coastline only she could see. She could hold her breath underwater for so long it made the other village children nervous, surfacing with a gasp and a smile, her hair slicked back like a seal's pelt. His son Phelan was quieter, more watchful. He didn't speak much, but he seemed to understand the language of the gulls and the rhythm of the tides. He could read the weather in the clouds with an accuracy that defied logic, and he often spent hours sitting on the cliffs, his small frame silhouetted against the vast, churning ocean, as if in silent communion. The fisherman did his best to anchor them to the land. He taught them to mend nets, to carve wood, to know the names of the wildflowers that grew in the machair. He told them stories of the land, of brave chieftains and clever crofters, of the spirits that lived in the standing stones. He filled their lives with the solid, dependable things of the human world. But he could not drain the ocean from their blood. As they grew from children into young adults, the whisper of the waves became a song, a melody that haunted their waking hours and colored their dreams. They felt a pull, a yearning they couldn't name. They would watch the seals basking on the offshore skerries with a strange, painful familiarity. Sometimes Rona would swear she saw one of the seals lift its head and watch her, its dark, liquid eyes filled with an intelligence and a sorrow that mirrored her own. She began to feel a profound sense of incompleteness, a feeling that a vital part of herself was missing, lost somewhere out in the cold, gray water. Phelan felt it too, but for him it was a physical ache. On stormy nights, when the wind howled around their small cottage and the waves crashed against the shore, he would be restless, pacing the floorboards like a caged animal. He felt the vibration of the sea in his bones, a deep, resonant hum that called to a part of him he didn't understand. He started asking questions his father couldn't or wouldn't answer, questions about their mother. The fisherman's stories of her were always vague, beautiful but hollow. He spoke of her kindness, her strange songs, her love for the sea. But when they asked where she came from or why she had to leave, his face would close up, his eyes clouding over with a grief so profound it silenced them. He would only say, she was from the sea and the sea called her home. But that wasn't enough. Not anymore. The answer felt like a half-truth, a beautiful story told to children to shield them from a more complex reality. One winter afternoon, while their father was out with the fishing fleet, delayed by a sudden squall, Rona and Phelan decided to look for answers themselves. They weren't sure what they were looking for. A letter. A token. anything that might tell them more about the woman who gave them their ocean-filled eyes. They searched the small cottage, every nook and cranny. They looked through their mother's meager belongings, a few worn dresses that still held the faint scent of sea salt and wildflowers, a small wooden comb, a string of polished shells. There was nothing. It was as if she had simply vanished, leaving no trace but the two of them. Defeated, Phelan sat on the edge of his father's bed. His eyes drifted to the large iron-bound sea chest at its foot. It was the one place they had never been allowed to go. Their father kept his most important possessions in it: sailing charts, his father's compass, the deed to the cottage. He always said it was to be left alone. But now a strange certainty settled over Phelan. The answer was in there. Rona joined him, her heart pounding. The lock was old and heavy. It had been a gift from their mother. Their father had once told them to keep his treasures safe. A bitter irony. They found the key, hidden on a high shelf behind a stack of dried peat. With trembling hands, Phelan fitted it into the lock. It turned with a heavy, groaning click that echoed in the silent cottage. They lifted the heavy lid. The top layer was just as they expected. Folded charts, a spyglass, a coil of new rope. But beneath it all, wrapped in oilcloth and bound tightly with twine, was a large, soft bundle. As Rona's fingers brushed against it, a jolt, like a memory from before she was born, shot through her. She and Phelan looked at each other, their shared premonition hanging in the air between them. Together they unwrapped it. The oilcloth fell away, and there, lying in the dark confines of the chest, was the most beautiful and impossible thing they had ever seen. It was a sealskin. It was vast, the color of wet slate, shimmering with an otherworldly silvery light. It was impossibly soft, yet they could feel the latent power thrumming within it. The scent that rose from it was not the smell of a dead animal, but the pure, wild, elemental scent of the deep ocean, of salt and storm and ancient cold. They didn't need to be told what it was. They knew. They knew in the marrow of their bones, in the very rhythm of their blood. This was their mother. This was their inheritance. This was the missing piece of their souls. Rona reached out a hesitant hand and laid it flat against the skin. The moment her palm made contact, a flood of sensations, of fragmented images and emotions, washed over her. The feeling of weightlessness in the water, the joy of a powerful dive, the cold pressure of the deep, the sound of 100 other seals singing in the darkness. It was a lifetime of memories that were not her own, yet felt as real as the wooden floor beneath her feet. She looked at Phelan and saw tears streaming down his face. He was touching it too, his expression one of awe and agonizing recognition. This was the source of their longing. This was the reason for their restlessness. They were not just the children of a fisherman. They were the children of a Selkie. At that moment, the cottage door opened, and their father stood there, dripping from the storm, his face etched with exhaustion from his battle with the sea. He stopped dead, his eyes falling on the open chest, on the shimmering sealskin, on the faces of his children. The color drained from his face. The net he was carrying slipped from his grasp and fell to the floor with a soft thud. For a long moment no one spoke. The only sounds were the howling of the wind and the crackling of the fire. The fisherman looked at his children, truly looked at them, and saw not the boy and girl he had raised, but two beings caught between two worlds, their faces illuminated by the heartbreaking truth. It was Rona who broke the silence. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her words were quiet, but they carried the weight of the ocean. "You hid her from us," she said, her voice trembling not with anger, but with a profound, earth-shattering sorrow. "You hid us from ourselves." The fisherman's shoulders slumped. The strength that had held him upright against 1,000 storms seemed to abandon him all at once. He looked at the sealskin, the source of his greatest joy and his deepest fear, and then back at the children he had tried so desperately to protect, to keep. "I loved her," he whispered, his voice raw with the grief that had been locked away for nearly 2 decades. "I loved her so much. I didn't want to lose her. And I didn't want to lose you." The words hung in the air, heavier than the thickest sea fog, changing the shape of the world the children had always known. For years, their father had been a silhouette of quiet authority, a man defined by his gruffness and his unyielding rules, a man who kept their mother a prisoner. But now that silhouette was filled in with the colors of a desperate, terrified love. Isla looked at her brother Ewan and saw her own shock mirrored in his eyes. This confession didn't excuse the years of their mother's silent sorrow. the longing gaze she always fixed upon the waves. It didn't erase the cage, even if the bars were made of love instead of iron, but it complicated everything. It painted their simple story of captor and captive with agonizing shades of gray. Their father wasn't a monster. He was just a man who had loved so fiercely, he had suffocated the very thing he adored. Ewan was the first to find his voice, though it was barely a whisper. "Where is it?" Their father didn't look up from his gnarled hands. He seemed to shrink in on himself, the years of stoic strength collapsing into a fragile heap of regret. "It's safe," he mumbled. "It's where it's always been." That wasn't an answer. It was another lock on another door. But for the first time, the children felt they might have the key. They left their father sitting there, a king dethroned in his own small cottage, and went outside. The salt spray felt different on their skin, sharper, more alive. The sea didn't just sing a song of longing for their mother anymore. Now it sang to them too. A silent agreement passed between them. They had to find it. Not for revenge. Not even in that moment for their mother's freedom. They had to find it to understand. To hold the truth in their own hands. Where would a man of the sea hide the sea itself? Their minds raced. They had grown up in this small world of cottage, cliff, and cove. They knew every loose floorboard, every hollow in the stone walls. But their father was clever, a man who knew how to hide things in plain sight. They started in the house, a place they now saw with new eyes. Every object seemed to hold a potential secret. The heavy mantelpiece clock, the loose stone in the hearth, the rafters thick with the smoke of 100 peat fires. They searched with a quiet desperation, their movements furtive, their ears tuned to the sound of their father's heavy footsteps. But they found nothing but dust and memories. The sun began to dip towards the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and violet. Ewan felt a surge of frustration. "It's not here," he said, his voice tight. He wouldn't keep it in the house. It's too close to her. Too dangerous. Isla's gaze drifted towards the small, weathered shed that leaned against the cliffside, where their father kept his nets, his ropes, and the tools of his trade. It was a place of work, of sweat and salt and fish scales. It smelled of the land, not the sea. It was the last place they would have thought to look. And that's why it had to be the one. They slipped out as the twilight deepened. The shed door creaked on its leather hinges, a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet evening. Inside, the familiar scent of tarred rope and drying seaweed filled their nostrils. Nets hung from the ceiling like ghostly webs. Oars and fishing floats cluttered the corners. It was a space of pure practical utility. Except for one thing. Tucked away under a pile of old stiff canvas was a large sea chest. It was not like the other plain, functional crates in the shed. This one was made of a dark, heavy wood, bound with tarnished brass. Intricate carvings of waves and sea creatures, worn smooth by time, decorated its surface. It was a beautiful ancient thing, a treasure chest from a forgotten world. They had seen it before, of course, but had always dismissed it as just another piece of old junk. Now they saw it for what it was, a vault. It was locked. A heavy rusted iron padlock secured the lid. Ewan pulled at it, his knuckles white, but it wouldn't budge. He looked around for something to pry it open, his frustration mounting again. But Isla simply placed a hand on his arm. She pointed to a small, carved knot in the wood just beside the lock. It was a sailor's knot, a Turk's head, intricately woven into the design. Her fingers, small and nimble, traced its pattern. She remembered watching her father tie these knots for hours on end, his rough hands moving with a surprising grace. She pushed one loop, then twisted another, following a logic that felt instinctual, a memory inherited through her blood. With a soft wooden click, a hidden mechanism released. The padlock sprang open. They looked at each other, their hearts pounding in their chests. This was it, the final secret. Slowly together they lifted the heavy lid. A faint otherworldly scent rose up to meet them. Not the musty smell of old wood, but the clean, wild fragrance of the deep ocean, of salt and storm and moonlight on water. Lying on a bed of faded velvet was not just one thing, but a small collection of treasures. There was a string of pearls that shimmered like captured starlight, a comb carved from a single iridescent shell, a small smooth white stone with a perfect hole through its center. These were the things of a mermaid, the trinkets of a sea maiden. Their father hadn't just stolen her skin. He had tried to keep the memory of her magic, supporting it in the dark. And underneath it all, folded with an impossible care, was the sealskin. It was more beautiful and more strange than they could have ever imagined. It didn't look like the coarse pelt of a common seal. It shimmered, even in the dim light of the shed, with 1,000 shades of silver, gray, and deep ocean blue. It was soft to the touch, impossibly so, like touching a cloud or a shadow. It felt cool, alive, humming with a faint, dormant energy. Holding it was like holding a storm in their hands, a captured tide, a living piece of the sea. This was their mother. Not the quiet, sad woman who stared out the cottage window, but the wild, free creature she was meant to be. This was her soul, her freedom, her very essence, locked away in a box by a man who loved her too much to let her go. Ewan gently lifted the skin from the chest. It was heavier than it looked, weighted with the gravity of 2 decades of captivity. He and Isla stood there in the dusty, silent shed. The truth finally laid bare between them. They held their mother's life in their hands. They could put it back. They could close the lid, slide the lock back into place, and pretend they had never found it. They could go back to their lives, to their quiet, fractured family, and leave the secrets buried. Their father would never know. Their mother would continue her long, slow fade. They would be safe, or they could take it to her. They could walk back to the cottage, into the warm light of the kitchen, and hand this shimmering skin to the woman who gave them life. An act of ultimate love and liberation. An act that would heal her, but would shatter their father. An act that would send their mother back to the waves, back to her true home, and away from them forever. They looked at the sealskin, then out the small, grimy window of the shed. They could see the lights of their cottage, a warm, inviting glow against the encroaching darkness. And beyond it, they could hear the relentless, eternal crash of the waves on the shore, calling, always calling. It was the oldest child, the one with his mother's deep, knowing eyes, who finally broke the silence. He whispered, not to his sister, but to the dust motes dancing in the single beam of moonlight, "It's in the house." His sister looked at him, her face pale. She knew what he meant. Not just the skin, but the answer. The reason for their mother's sadness. The source of the melody she hummed when she thought no one was listening. It was all in the house, waiting. They slipped out of the shed, silent as shadows, their bare feet making no sound on the damp grass. The cottage door was never locked. Their father trusted the sea to be his only guard. Inside, the fire had burned down to glowing embers, casting long dancing shadows on the walls. Their mother was asleep in her chair, her mending having fallen from her lap, her head tilted at an angle that looked uncomfortable, yet deeply weary. Her breathing was soft, a quiet rhythm against the roar of the ocean outside. Their father was nowhere to be seen, likely out on the cliffs, staring at the waves as he so often did after a storm. The children knew where to look. There was one place in the cottage that was their father's alone. An old sea chest made of dark, heavy wood bound with iron straps. It sat at the foot of their parents' bed, and they had been forbidden to touch it since they could remember. Their father kept his sailing charts in it, he'd said. Old tools. Nothing a child would want. But they'd seen the way he would sometimes just rest his hand on the lid, his expression distant, a strange mix of pride and sorrow. The lock was heavy, rusted by the salt air. But their father, a man of routine, always kept the key on a nail just inside the chimney flue, hidden from all but the most curious eyes. The older boy, his hands trembling slightly, reached into the soot-blackened space. His fingers brushed against the cold, familiar shape of the iron key. With a quiet click that sounded as loud as a thunderclap in the silent cottage, the lock sprang open. They lifted the heavy lid together. The scent that rose from the chest was not of old paper or rusted metal. It was the scent of the ocean, not the fishy, salty smell of the shore, but the deep, clean, wild scent of the open water. It smelled of kelp forests in cold, clear depths. It smelled of freedom. And there, nestled on a bed of old, worn-out fishing nets, lay the Selkie skin. It wasn't just a pelt. It shimmered in the faint ember light, the color of a moonlit wave, silver and gray and deep, deep black. It was impossibly soft to the touch, and it felt alive. It seemed to hum with a low, ancient energy. It was the most beautiful and terrifying thing they had ever seen. They knew with a certainty that settled deep in their bones that this was their mother's soul. This was the part of her that was missing. Carefully, reverently, they lifted it from the chest. It was heavier than it looked, carrying the weight of years, the weight of a stolen life. They carried it together into the main room and laid it gently on the floor before their sleeping mother. For a moment nothing happened. The world held its breath. Then, as if drawn by an invisible current, their mother stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, not with a sleepy confusion, but with a sudden sharp awareness. Her gaze fell upon the skin, and everything changed. The weariness fell away from her face like a mask. The quiet sadness that had always clouded her eyes evaporated, replaced by a fire, a shock of recognition so profound it was painful to watch. A sound escaped her lips, a sound that was not quite a gasp and not quite a sob. It was the sound of a prisoner tasting fresh air for the first time in a lifetime. She knelt, her hands hovering over the skin, afraid to touch it, as if it were a dream she might break. Then, with a shuddering breath, she laid her palm flat against its surface. And the children watched as the memory of the sea flooded back into her. They saw it in her eyes. They saw the rolling waves, they saw the silver shoals of fish, they saw the dark, silent world beneath the surface. They saw her other family, the sleek, whiskered faces of her kin, waiting for her in the cold, loving embrace of the water. At that exact moment, the cottage door creaked open. Their father stood on the threshold, his silhouette framed by the pre-dawn gloom. He took in the scene at a glance. The open chest, his children's wide, fearful eyes, and his wife, his beautiful human wife, caressing the sealskin with a look of rapturous, heartbreaking longing. The strength seemed to drain from his body. The fisherman, the man who could wrestle a storm and win, looked utterly defeated. He didn't shout. He didn't rage. He simply whispered her name, and it was the sound of a world ending. She looked up at him, and for the first time, the children saw her not as their mother, but as a being caught between two worlds. There was love in her eyes for the man before her, a deep and genuine love forged over years of shared sunrises and sleeping children. But there was also the undeniable, irresistible pull of her true home, a force as powerful and as merciless as the tide itself. She had to choose. And in truth, the choice had been made for her long ago, the day she was born of the sea. She stood, the sealskin clutched in her hands. She went to her children first, kissing each of them on the forehead. Her lips were cold, already tasting of salt. "I love you," she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. "More than the sun and the moon. When you miss me, look to the sea. I will be there. I will always be watching." Then she turned to her husband. She reached out and touched his cheek, her fingers tracing the lines the sun and wind had carved there. "You gave me a good life," she said, her voice clear and steady. "You gave me love. You gave me them. But you cannot give me the sea. It was never yours to take or to give." He didn't try to stop her. He couldn't. He had known, from the moment he hid the skin, that he was only borrowing her, that his happiness was built on a theft, and that all debts to the ocean are eventually paid. He just stood there, a statue of a man, as she walked past him and out the door. The children and their father followed her down to the shore. The sky was beginning to lighten in the east, painting the horizon in shades of gray and pale rose. She walked to the water's edge, to the line of foam left by the retreating waves. There she turned and looked at them one last time, a final searing image of the woman they knew, the mother, the wife. Then, with a fluid grace they had never seen in her before, she pulled the sealskin over her shoulders. The transformation was both instantaneous and eternal. The human form wavered, shimmered, and dissolved. Where a woman had stood, there was now a large, sleek silver seal. She looked back at them with eyes that were no longer human, but held a familiar, ancient intelligence. An understanding. Farewell. She gave a single barking cry, a sound of pure, unbridled joy and profound sorrow mixed together. Then she slid into the water. The awkwardness of her land-bound body vanished. In the sea she was perfection. She was power and grace. She dove and surfaced, once, twice, and then with a final flick of her powerful tail, she was gone, swallowed by the vast, gray expanse of her home. The father and his two children stood on the beach until the sun was fully risen, staring out at the empty water. Their cottage was no longer a home, but a monument to a beautiful ghost. They lived out their days by the shore, and the fisherman never took another wife. And sometimes, on clear evenings, the children would swear they could see a particular seal, larger and more graceful than the rest, who would follow their father's boat, her dark, loving eyes keeping watch from just beyond the waves. The legend of the Selkie endures not because it's a story about magic, but because it's a story about us. It's a story about belonging and the cages we sometimes build out of love. It speaks to the wildness in the human heart, the part of us that feels a deep, inexplicable longing for a place we may have never been, a home we only know in our dreams. It's the eternal conflict between the safety of the shore and the freedom of the deep, a reminder that you can love someone with all your heart, but you can never truly own them. For we all have a secret, wild nature, a sealskin of our own hidden away, waiting for the call of our own particular sea.